evening, following daylight saving time, so hopefully you all got the extra hour of rest. Feeling okay as we move through the day. We appreciate you being here. If those are interested who are attending either in person or via Zoom here that would like to speak during the public comment section of the meeting, please use the sign sheet at the front of the door or the link in the chat if you're joining us via Zoom. For public comment, each comment will have a maximum of 3 minutes. The public comment section for the meeting will be limited to no more than 1 hour. If more than 20 comments are received, time per comment will be reduced to 2 minutes. If more than 30 comments are received, time per comment will be reduced to 1 minute. Again, we thank you all for attending. We thank you for our EDAC members, as well as our Lee County School District representatives. And just as a reminder, as we enter this meeting space, the mission of the EDAC is to monitor the district's maintenance of a unitary school system and adherence to school board policies concerning equity and diversity. So that should always be at our forethought, as well as the vision to create a community where individuals feel safe, cared for, and connected as one, all having access to equity, feeling included to cultivate diversity and inclusiveness. So as we enter this meeting, I think it's important for us to be reminded of that, as you can see in the agenda as well. But at this time, I would move to approve agenda items for the meeting as presented.
Second.
We have a motion, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Motion by Holly Marth to move forward. Do we have a second? Second. Seen the second by our Vice Chair, Dennis Quisenberry. So it's been properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? Any objection? Hearing no discussion or objection, I think we can move with the approval of the agenda by unanimous consent. Our next agenda item is to approve the minutes for our meeting in October. Do we have a motion to approve the meeting minutes for October 12, 2021?
Motion to approve.
And if you don't mind, just say your name for that, just make sure our secretary was able to capture that.
Sorry, that was Amy Burrell-Premier.
Okay, thank you, Amy. Motion by Amy, you have a second to approve the minutes from October 12th. Second. Second by our vice chair. Any discussion?
Dr. Blakely, this is Ryan Bell. I just wanted to make a quick,
Any objection?
I don't know if you can hear me.
All right, no discussion, no objection.
Sounded like someone was trying to say something.
Yeah, Dr. Blakely, it's Ryan Bell. I'm here in person. I don't know if you can hear me now.
Okay.
Okay, if you can hear me now, I just wanted to make a quick note. We found a typo in the minutes, and we already communicated it with the staff. However, under the heading 2021-2022 Welcome and Introduction, we just made a slight change to the second sentence so that it made grammatical sense. It currently reads EDAC to make, recommend, that the, and so on. I make a recommendation to have that read EDAC to make a recommendation that the school board, and then continue on just so that the sentence is grammatically correct.
Okay, so on the floor, the discussion was to amend the 21-22 welcome introduction to read as there was a motion to make a recommendation to the school board for a grammatical correction. Any further discussion on that? That was the motion was moved by Amy to move forward to minutes. Are you willing to have a friendly amendment to those updates to the minutes?
Are you asking me?
Yeah, you made the motion to approve the minutes. I just want to make sure you're.
Yeah, yes.
Okay. So it's been moved with the updates to the minutes to 21-22 welcome introduction. Second, any further discussion? Any objections? Hearing and seeing no objections, the minutes are approved by unanimous consent. We'll move to our next agenda item, which will be for public comment, and I will, defer to our secretary for the in-person individuals, if anyone sign up to speak in public comment.
No, Dr. Blakely. I don't know.
Okay, and we have individuals in the chat that would like to speak on public comment. Are we able to share that link? We have 2 individuals I see in the chat.
Dr. Blakely, do I need to tell you that I want to speak on public comment, Denise Nystrom?
Yes, so we just placed in the chat, there's a Google link here in the chat for everyone who would like to speak on public comment, so you can click that for documentation purposes. And as a reminder, for our guests who are interested in speaking during the public comment section of the meeting, please use the sign up sheet link in the chat box. Each comment will have a maximum of 3 minutes. The public comment section portion of the meeting will be limited to no more than 1 hour, and 20 or more comments, time per comment will be reduced to 2 minutes. If more than 30 comments are received, time per comment will be reduced to 1 minute. And our secretary will provide us with the order in which individuals will speak.
Dr. Blakely, we do have one individual that has signed up, Ms. Christine DiVigelli.
And before we do public comment,
And also
I'd
Ms.
love to see more people.
And also Ms. Denise Nordstrom and Jamie Merchant.
Okay.
So so the order is Christine DiVigelli, Denise Nystrom, and Jamie Merchant.
Thank you.
Dr. Blakely,
Yes.
could you please remind everyone to mute themselves when they're not speaking? There's a lot of background noise.
Thank you.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, thank you for that. Yes, if you're not speaking, we just ask that you mute your mic so
Sorry,
we can have
guys.
feedback and we may hear it. So first, we will have public comment from Ms. Christina, and I will, once you begin speaking, I will begin the timer.
Good evening. Some things never change, and unfortunately, rarely do people either. You know, I watched a meeting from 2019 last night that looked like it could have been last week because they were discussing the same things about the portables in East Lee as they are now. Why has this crisis not yet been taken care of? There's absolutely no good reason why any child in Lee County should have to spend a single academic year in a portable. Yet we have adults who spent their entire K-12 in one, and now their children are in those very same portables. There's only one real reason for it, and it's reprehensible that in the year 2021, our school district is still treating our children like it did back in 1950. Every child in Lee County, regardless of where they live, has the right to the same quality education in a safe learning environment. What our school district has done by choosing to purchase portables rather than lease them is steal from that school the precious seats it needs in order to qualify for a new brick and mortar school. The district owns 176 portables, and 136 of those are in an area where more than 50% of our minority students are located. This bothers me so much. I was born and raised right here in Lee County, and I am a product of this education system. I started high school at North Fort Myers High, but ended up being sent to another school with roughly 500 students, of which I was the minority. Of all of my public school experience, I thank God for allowing me to have this high school experience. I grew up oblivious to the existence of racism in our schools because of it. The administration and staff at that school that I was sent to as a punishment cared more about me and the other students than any of the other schools I went to. My experience gave me perspective, and it helped me avoid developing an attitude of hate and discrimination, very similar to the attitudes I see currently working in and controlling our school district today. Leadership starts at the top, and when people like Patrika are allowed to remain in those positions after proving to us time and time again that deep down, she really doesn't like anyone that doesn't look like her, we have a huge problem. And it shouldn't surprise any of us to see so many children of color being mistreated because of it. The fact that she chose to remain on the board, even though she was asked to resign by the public, a fellow board member, committees, and people in other school districts across the state, proves that she cares nothing about any of us. And she cares even less about whether or not Lee County, my home, is treating the children in East Lee like second-class citizens. How much longer are we going to allow this to continue? How many more generations need to grow up in portables while we build fancy schools to attract tourist dollars before we say enough? There's no room for hate and discrimination in Lee County, and there is absolutely no more room for Chris Patrica and the Lee County School District. Thank you so much for your time tonight.
Thank you, Christina DiMagelli. Next we have Jamie Merchant, who will be speaking with public comment. Again, you will have 3 minutes for public comment.
Dr. Blakely, excuse me, Dr. Blakely, next on the list was Denise. I'm sorry to
My
disrupt you.
apologies.
Okay.
Denise Norsham will be next.
Thank you, Crystal. Okay, as you may or may not know, since the last EDAC meeting, a group of us have filed a complaint with the Office of Civil Rights against board member Chris Patrica, and we are against building the new K-8 school in Estero. According to federal law, every child is entitled to FAPE, a free and appropriate education. We know children in the East Zone have been taught in trailers for over 20 years. At one of the board meetings, a mother said that she had graduated having learned in those trailers, and now her child was learning in those trailers. Overcrowded schools cause low achievement rates, high dropout rates, increased school violence, and an inability for students to successfully transition from high school to college, vocational schools, or work. We are not happy that children in Lee County, especially our most ethnically diversified at-risk population, are learning in trailers. We have long believed that the numbers were not there to warrant the building of the new K-8 school. This information is based on a video dated May 4th, 2020, where Ken Savage presented. He stated at that presentation that the student population growth in Estero was slow and that the area that needed building was the East Zone. Keep in mind that Dr. Savage was the chief of operations in 2020, and it was his job to oversee the district's needs in terms of building and renovations. It was Dr. Atkins who was superintendent while Ms. Patrica, in her own words, gave 5 presentations a day to talk the taxpayers into voting for the half-penny sales tax, which was to be used in for the K-8 building. The fact that at almost every single board member, Gwen Gittens, questioned the student population growth in Estero compared to the East Zone fell on deaf ears by board members and administration, made us all wonder why the district would not produce credible information and put this matter to rest. Many of us have sent in public records requests to request such thing as how many students from areas other than Estero are bused into Estero to attend its schools. To date, no one has received an answer to their public records requests. What I am saying is that we are of the belief that the district embellished the student growth numbers in Estero in order to get approval to build the K-8. Keep in mind that there is school choice in the district, and there are students that live in one area that travel to other areas to go to school. So if, for example, the district used the San Carlos students that were attending Estero in those numbers, it would make it look like they needed a building. Listen closely to the student population numbers by ethnicity in school. You may even want to jot them down, and they come from a chart from the Lee County School District dated October 4th, 2020. In Estero, there are 3 elementary schools. In Three Oaks Elementary, there are 64% white, 25% Hispanic, 2% Black, and 8 other. That totals 99%. In Estero, there's also Three Oaks Middle School where there are 53% white, 38% Hispanic, 3% Black, and 6% other. That totals 97%. In Estero, there is also Pine Woods Elementary. Am I, my time up?
Time up, I'll give you 15 seconds to conclude your.
Well, what I'll tell you is I will send this to you, Dr. Blakely. Let me just start by saying that. And let me just end by saying this poses many, many questions about whether the school, the K-8 school, should be built And when you look at the ethnic breakdowns, I think it warrants the school district coming clean, being transparent, and putting the numbers out there about what went on in 1920 and into now, and hold the building. And I'll send you the information, Dr. Blakely, so that you'll have it.
Thank you for your comments. Next, we will have Jamie Merchant.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing us the time to speak at your meeting. As stated in last month's meeting, I have grave concerns about the mental stability of School Board Member District 3, Chris Patrica. Earlier this year, she voted no on acknowledging Hispanic Heritage Month. In September, she had made some very concerning comments about the Guatemalan students enrolled in School District of Lee County. She has still not apologized. During the meeting where these comments of hers were discussed, Attorney Bruno had to ask her if she was sorry, and her response was, well, obviously. That is not an apology. Last week, she made defamatory and slanderous comments about her past opponent, Jacqueline Perez, whom is also a minority in District 3. I am proud to say that I am one of the 5 friends in Mrs. Perez's angry clique. Mrs. Patrica's comments could not be further from the truth because we have never gone after her children. The one picture she speaks of her child playing football was taken the same day that Mrs. Patrica left district office telling people that her son, the one in the picture whose face is not shown, was sick with COVID. This angry clique received many phone calls after this information was heard, and we feel we were rightfully angry. Mrs. Patrica has spent many months telling the community to keep their children home if they are sick. She has been the force behind masking our children, and when she refuses to wear one herself while on district property. And she was extremely angry when Dr. Savage reversed the mask mandate and provided an opt-out option for families just the week prior. Was Mrs. Patrica exposing the community to COVID to further push her agenda, or was she trying to avoid showing up to a deposition where she needed to make statements regarding her role in canceling the Oaks contract? Additionally, residents of Lee County, as well as board member Gwen Gittens, have repeatedly asked for the numbers to prove that District 3 is in fact at 117% capacity as needed to show the Department of Education for a new building to be a vote. Nobody has received these numbers. We were able to obtain an occupancy report which shows that the handful of schools on or surrounding Three Oaks Parkway within a 3-mile radius of the land that Quadruple A School is supposed to be built are not at capacity. In fact, the average is 96%. Are these numbers accurate? If so, what numbers was Chris Patrica using to create her report to the Department of Education? I have concerns about the number of years that the learning pods have been used in East Lee and Lehigh Acres. Earlier this school year, a concerned parent made public comment stating that she was educated in these learning pods and now her children are being educated in them as well. Why is that? Why is District 5, with more than 50% minority students receiving their education in learning pods instead of inside a school like the predominantly white students in District 3? School District of Lee County owns 176 pods, and 136 of those pods are in East Lee. This is not a conducive learning environment for the children. Because we feel like our requests and grievances have fallen on deaf ears, specifically with Attorney Bruno and the school board, we have filed a civil rights complaint with the federal government to investigate Quadruple A School. We are hoping that with your help, our concerns will be heard with the district. The board cannot move forward with Chris Patrica still serving. She has caused so much chaos in the community and has opened the district up for a libel lawsuit. Her actions continue to prove that she does not have the best interest of District 3 in mind. When will it stop? When will the rest of the board hold her accountable? After all, if you don't condemn it, then you condone it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie, for your comments. Are there additional individuals for public comments?
Not at this time, Dr. Blakely.
Right. Thank you for those who share with us for the public comment. Again, you may stay on the call with us. We will continue with our agenda as presented. In our next agenda item, we will have board member area redistricting. So Dr. Denise Carlin, Chief of Staff and District Staff are here to provide an overview of the board member residence and area redistricting process. So I will yield time to discuss this.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much. Are you able to hear us? We're just doing a sound check right now. If you're on the screen, if you want to show us a thumbs up if you can see us, or hear us rather. If you're on Zoom, if you could do a thumbs up, if not, we're gonna go to a
She
plan
can-
B here.
She can unmute and then.
You unmute and then.
Okay. Problem is, we got feedback when I did that.
Yeah, because they were.
Okay.
Only
Try that
one
again.
person can be unmuted at the time.
Let's try that again. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, everyone.
So just let her speak from your computer.
Okay.
Give her-
Our team is here.
Our team is here.
So
It's
we're just confirming right now that everyone can hear us.
Can you mute yourself, please? I think Crystal's
Okay.
computer.
Thank you, sir. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Just unmute yourself.
Good evening, everyone. Would you please, if you're on Zoom, if you would just show us the thumbs up if you can hear us?
Good.
Yes.
All right, we have a few more thumbs up now. All right, terrific. So as Dr. Blakely said, my name is Denise Carlin, and I'm currently the Chief of Staff. Accompanying me this evening is Kathy Dupree Bruno, who is our Board Attorney and General Counsel. Kathy Eba, who is our Director of Planning. Jared Eady, who you know very well, he is our Director of Diversity and Inclusion. And also on Zoom this evening, we have our demographer consultant, David Cates from Davis Demographics. So our team is extremely proud to be here with you this evening to initiate a conversation with you and to present some information relative to redistricting. Am I driving this? So here's the agenda for this evening. We have a little bit of an overview of redistricting. If you're like me and new to this conversation, you may be talking like, what are they possibly talking about? What does this relate to? And so we're going to just give you a very brief overview of what redistricting is. Mr. Eady is going to talk with you a little bit about the history of redistricting in our school district. What has that looked like over the last 30 to 40 years? We're going to have our attorney talk with you about some statutes that apply relative to redistricting. Then we'll turn it over to our demographer as well as Ms. Eba, who will talk with you about the census data, which is how we start to make our decisions based on redistricting. We'll talk a little bit about the criteria for making a redistrict map and also share with you some of the maps that have been put forward. We do have a timeline that we will share with you. This does need to happen in odd number of years, and of course, being 2021, that is the time frame that we are looking at by the end of the school year, by the end of the fiscal year, actually. Excuse me, by the end of the calendar year. I'll get that right. Third time's a charm. So we will have our discussions and our decision making by December 31st. We'll share with you where we are with the school board in terms of their discussions and considerations. We'll wrap up with any questions you have as well as feedback, and then we will be done for this evening. So that is our agenda for tonight. So let's go ahead and jump in. First of all, we do have a requirement every 10 years, and we being local government. So you'll see the commission, you'll see the school district, as well as other municipalities using census data to redraw their district lines. And the whole purpose of that is to readjust based on population from the census. The requirement is that no boundary change would affect the residence qualifications of any incumbent member, which basically means that if you are making boundary changes, which is what our district will be doing, looking at readjustment of our population, we will be making some changes to our school board member districts. Some people get this confused with districts for children or where children go to school. This really has to do with who our school board represents. So we will be making those changes based on the shift in population that occurred from the last time we had a census, which was 2010. And basically, what the last bullet point there talks about is that those boundary changes, there will be no boundary change that would affect the residence qualifications of any incumbent school board member, or shall it disqualify that incumbent member during the term for which he or she is elected. So if one of the changes in the district lines affects one of our board members, then that would not disqualify that board member for the current term that they are in. So that's very important to remember. So we're going to give you some additional information based on Florida statutes, and I'll turn it over at this time to our board attorney, Kathy Dupree-Bruno.
Hello, good evening, everybody. Thank you for having us tonight. So just a couple of things that I wanted to point out to you before we get started, before we get into the history, is some of the statutory requirements pursuant to Florida Statute 1001.36. The most important thing to gather from that statute is the fact that we really need to make sure that we have equal population. That is the essence of what the redistricting will be and why it's actually even triggered, is to make sure that we have equal population. And then the statute also then discusses what needs to be done. For example, we need to publish it, we need to make sure within 30 days that we bring it to the clerk's court, and some other things to make sure that the entire county is aware of the redistricting. After we give you a little bit more of the history, we'll talk a little bit more of the legal framework when we're looking at redistricting.
And so we're going to pass this down. And Mr. Eby, you're up.
Hello, everybody on Zoom, and also those who are joining us. For your notes, Mr. Chairman, you have 4 members of your committee who have joined us in person. So just a brief history about redistricting for our board member residence areas. It's important to note that staff reviewed the past 30 years of the redistricting process for our board members to see how these processes were completed. In 1991, the board member resident area alternatives were presented by the district staff. At that time, the Board of County Commissioners had one version of boundaries and the school board had a separate version of the boundaries. So in 1991, the maps between the county and the school board did not conform with each other. However, in the year 2001, after the 2000 census, the Lee County School Board then modified their residence areas to conform with the areas established by the Lee County Board of County Commissioners. An important historical note to note between 1991, 2001, and 2011, at that time, the school board members were elected through a system of at-large electing process. So the at-large electoral process meant this, that all of the members who were elected to the board resided in a specific area. However, all of the voters in Lee County had the opportunity to vote on those respective board members. To ensure that continuity for 2001 and 2011, the Lee County Board of County Commissioners map was the official map adopted by the school board. An important notation where we deviate slightly, in 2014, the voters of Lee County, through a referendum, voted to increase the number of school board members from 5 to 7. An important historical notation for that one, 5 of the members would be elected from a single member residence area, meaning that all voters in that specific area or that district had the opportunity to vote only on their candidate, and 2 of the members were elected at large. That means that all of Lee County voters had an opportunity to vote on those 2 individuals. So once again, 2014, the Lee County School Board increased from 5 to 7 members, 5 members being elected from a single member residence area. That means only the voters in that specific area or district could vote on the respective candidates, and 2 of the members were elected at large. It is also important to note that in 2014, the lines that were used to designate those at-large or single-member district areas were based on the map from the 2010 census after it was approved in 2011.
Okay, so now we're gonna talk a little bit more about the legal framework of redistricting. And really, the most important thing for you to remember is that, hold on 1 second. Okay, thank you. One of the most important things is that the concept of one person, one vote is the main thing that we really have to take into consideration based on the Supreme Court's interpretation of the Constitution. And that basically is what we were talking about when we were looking at the statute, which is equal population, as close to it as possible. Usually a 10% deviation, the United States Supreme court has said that's a minimus deviation, so we wanna keep it within that 10%. The other thing that's really important is the obligation under the Voting Rights Act of 1965, Section 2, which, okay, can you hear me now better? Okay, which is extremely important too, because that is what really dictates that districts cannot be drawn in a way to dilute minority votes. There is a legal test in terms of how to determine whether or not this is going to be a district that would qualify and whether or not an argument can be made about minority voter dilution, and that's called the Gingles test, which comes from a case. And basically, what you have to show is that there's an existence of a minority group that is sufficiently and geographically compact to constitute a majority minority single member district, and that the minority group is politically cohesive. In other words, they generally vote in the same way, and that the white majority votes sufficiently as a bloc, usually to defeat the minority's preferred candidate. Now, even though the Voting Rights Act, Section 2, does say you need to be careful with the dilution of the minority vote, we also have to be very, very careful because the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment specifically says that you cannot make decisions based on race. And for congressional districts, we're looking at the Due Process Clause of the 5th Amendment. So there is a very strong balancing test that we have to do. Race cannot be the predominant factor that subordinates all of the other traditional redistricting principles, unless you can show a very compelling state reason for it. So it gets a little complicated, but there is a legal process and legal arguments that will have to be made. So we have to be very careful with that balancing test. So what are the things, now, to be clear, race can be considered. Race can be considered. However, it cannot be the predominant factor. And if it is the predominant factor, then the burden shifts on the governmental agency to be able to prove as to why there's a compelling state interest. Now, so what are the things that we can take a look at? Well, you want to make sure, again, one person, one vote, equal population. 2, you want to make sure that your districts are as compact and as contiguous as possible. You want to look at your natural boundaries. You also want to make sure that you take into consideration that you're not diluting a minority vote so that you're not in violation of the Voting Rights Act. You want to make sure that the boundaries are retained as much as possible, and that you take communities of interest into consideration. And communities of interest, again, we'll go back to the Gingles test, which are districts that you have a strong minority population, they're politically cohesive, and the white majority would vote normally to block their preferred candidate. So that's a gist of a very complicated area of the law when it comes to redistricting.
Thank you. All right, the next step is to share with you some of the data that goes to triggers this process. Again, David Keynes, graphics, photographer. I didn't create these maps, I'm sharing with you today, but I do this also for a living so I can answer questions. It's the accounting that generated these maps. I'm going to initially walk you through the checking process with the 2020 census that required every 10 years. So what you see on the screen here is the current district boundaries. And on here is the resident population counts, one for 2010 census and 2020. And if you look carefully, you can see the 2010 numbers for all 5 district areas are very similar, a little over 123,000 people. And again, this is ages 0 through the elderly. This is not based on voting age or anything. This is all total population at the time. So you can now see how much each area changed over the next 10 years. The one area that grew the most was District Area 2, and some of the areas grew quite a bit as well. You can see the bottom right corner, the number, the target number in bold. That's the average. If you add up all the total population in the county at the current time and divide it by 5, you come up with a target area of a little over 152,000. So that's the actual number that, as a demographer or whoever puts these new maps together, is trying to aim. So District 4 is actually, just by coincidence, without making any boundary changes, is right around that exact area. And you can see in the bottom left corner, the school board members living in each of these areas, and the 2 members that are at large. So there are shifts that happen naturally over a 10-year period, sorry, and every census this has to be checked. So the next slide. So these are the numbers, and these are actually the difference or the variances with the current boundaries compared to that target. And you can see District Area 1 and District Area 2 are the ones that are the most off the target. Essentially, District 1 is below 5% of what the target is, and District 2 is 5% or a little bit above. And a few other areas, District 3 and 5 are plus or minus over 3%. So these deviations are really the indicators, and after you first check this to make sure that the district areas are not in compliance and therefore needs to be looked at as balancing more. If these variances were closer to plus or minus 1 or 2%, then the district boundaries could remain. And this is just a slide. These are going to get produced by the county, but this is they were able to acquire the 2020 census data. See in the top left corner the total 760,822 total residents in the county compared to 10 years prior, about the 618,000. And then this is the breakdown between the 2 different census period snapshots as what the percentage was for the population and the percentage change over that 10-year period. And I want everyone else to note on this is that, as Kathy just mentioned, that race is not used when looking at the boundaries. They are checked after a scenario is created and the numbers balance. Then we're able to pull up census information based on race to check and look at the different percentages. So this is based on current boundaries. The next slide. All right, so what is it that demographer does? And this is a process being done all across the United States, not just in your district, it's all across the United States. First of all, we say the census data is supposed to come out in March or April this year, and because of the delay due to COVID, it did not become available to, I think, August, September in some cases. So with the district having to make a decision by the end of December, it's really shrunken down the amount of time frame for this. So the county got to work right away in August, comparing to the 2020 census. As a demographer, you're supposed to make sure that it's first and foremost equal population or within a certain variance over for all the 5 areas. You want them to be contiguous. You don't want areas to be disconnected from each other, and you want them to be more or less compact. Picture like drawing a circle or like a ball around each area. You don't want these to be kind of long, east-west, north-south areas. You want them more compact, ideally. And there's no discrimination between incumbents, political party. It's just strictly balancing the numbers of total population. And the ethnicity and all that and whatnot is shared after the scenarios are created. And as mentioned before, it has to comply with the Federal Voting Rights Act. And again, each year, this happens every odd year. So this is the year to do it. Every other year is the year that the boundaries can be looked at upon again. But for now, it's required to have this done by the end of the year. And next year would be a voting year where you vote on a representative, potentially in your area, and probably one at-large member as well. Okay, this was a link there, and do I take this, or Kathy, you want to talk about this, or want me to go?
You can continue, David.
All right. Now again, I just want to make this clear. Even though I'm a demographer and I do maps like this, we're doing it all across country. These maps you're seeing were created by the county GIS people, and also they vetted through their legal departments. And then these get shared with their county commissioners, as well as the school board as well. So these are all, at the bottom there, you can see alternative numbers. And there's, the blue lines represent the current boundaries, and the color shadings represent the proposed new boundaries. So this is a minimal change scenario. You see the bottom right corner on the square mileage. And you'll see this as we scroll through the maps. Some are much larger than others. This one, the large area you see for District 5, going to be all below that line, below one of the main things you notice on this with Lehigh Acres. There's not as many people there now. It's a potential for development there, but remember this is based on total population at the current time. So you can see there's a little bit of adjustments for between District 1 and 4, a little bit of adjustments between 2 and 4, and a little bit of adjustments between 5 and 4. You can see that, and then even District 3 had some slight changes as well. This got it into compliance. So even though you see some saying -877 below the target or above 458, it's still within legal and acceptable variance. And they're all more or less still around the 152,000 mark. So this is alternate 1. So let's move on to the next one. There's additional data for these maps as well out there, but we just don't have the time to be able to share all that information with you today. But here's, again, another alternate. You can see this change between 4 and 5 in kind of the North Fort Myers area. And all the first couple of maps, notice, again, these are your current boundaries in blue. So the first few scenarios showed like District 4 crossing the bridges into, I guess, joining, you can say, the northern part of Cape Coral with part of Fort Myers. That's the way it has been for the last, these 4 or 5 years or maybe longer. And there's a good part of Fort Myers that's split up between, in this case, District 4, District 2. But again, a little bit of exchanges, not much geography changing, and this alternative to make it compliant. Number 3, this one's a little more changed. You can see with the square mileage change there. The main difference is that the area, that the northern Fort Myers area now is self-contained. It's not tied to that District 4 area. But to do that, there was a domino effect. You have to shift the population to balance. So the southern part, or South Fort Myers or whatnot, the Island McGregor area now is paired up with District 1, with the south part of Fort Myers, with Cape Coral, as well as the islands. And you can see these changes there. District 3 had a little bit more changes to it, brought in more of San Carlos, and the area also Lehigh Acres. This scenario is pretty much self-intact, but in order to make it get over or near that target area, it has to cross over the 75 a little bit. Number 4, again, very similar, not much change compared to the current boundaries, just some exchanging of some areas to make a balance. We can kind of just look at this for a few minutes, but keep on. There's really not, a lot of these are very similar. Okay. This being District Alternative 5. This one, I think is the one that's favored by the County Commissioner's Office. But you can see there's not much change. In fact, I think it might be the one with the most minimal change to become compliant. And they're pretty close to that target. They're all within like 100. So this is as close you're going to get to the numbers, the percentage, and with just a little bit of tweaking between each of these areas, it does balance, which is one thing to note. Next, okay. Number 6, there we go. So this is a map that was submitted by the NAACP. This was vetted through the county. They produced the map, double-checked the numbers, went through their legal department, and as you can see, the numbers are compliant. They are within about that 152,000 plus or minus a percent or 2. But you can see it's more dramatic changes. Unfortunately, I don't have the overlay here of the current boundaries. But if you can remember from the previous maps, this has a very wide sweeping area at the top, starts in the northern part of Cape Coral, goes all the way through, out even as far out as including part of Lehigh Acres, and the Alva area and all the areas in between. And then Lehigh Acres is kind of broken up here in this scenario. Part of it is to the greenish area, and the area down there is tied though to the northern part of Fort Myers. And the other southern part of Fort Myers is in the District 2 area, and you can see the shifting there a little bit with the green area down there in the south. And lastly, this is scenario 7. There's 7 scenarios I'm sharing with you that the county considered. This was submitted by one of the county commissioners, and they vetted again through the demographers and the lawyers. The numbers balance out very well. You can see the Fort Myers area there is more or less self-contained. The 1 district area in the center, Lehigh Acres is all kind of in one area, goes all the way up to the northern part of the district boundary. You got top part of Cape Coral with North Fort Myers combined there. And then you can kind of see there again that Iona River area tied in the southern part of Fort Myers with the southern part of Cape Coral and the island areas. And then you can see the southern part down at the bottom kind of extend to this little bit more of the green area right up on the Lehigh Acres border there. And Dr. Carlin, you want to cover this?
Yes, sir. So thank you very much, everybody. So at this point, we want to wrap up our presentation with just a couple of final slides. One is you can see the timeline for the school board's decision-making. Again, as we talked about, 2021 is the year to redistrict. So basically, this just shares with you, in September, the county did release the data and the map to prove the need to redistrict, and that was based on the 152,000 figure that David just provided. So you can see that our county did grow and that we do need to make a shift. We had 2 board briefings in October. The first one was really to share the census data and the need to redistrict. And then from there, we had a conversation with the board on the 19th of October around the various maps that had been submitted at that point. We also opened the floor at the November 2nd board action meeting for community groups that wanted to come present. And the NAACP was the only group that came forward at that point to make a presentation to the board. Last Wednesday, we met with the board in a special briefing where we asked for consensus. You know, basically, are you going with one of the county maps or are you drawing your own? And we had extensive conversation during that time with the board. And at that time, we received consensus from the board, direction from the board, that they would go with one of the county maps. They did not decide which county map, but they said one of the 7, they would be comfortable pulling back to that decision. And so when we go forward on November 16th, which is another week or so, we will come forward and we will say to the board, okay, you gave us direction that you wanted to go with one of the county maps. Let's talk through each one of the county maps and see if we can get direction at that point. The reason for that happening is on December 7th, remember that magic day is the end of this year, December 31st, we have to have selected a map, a direction. So on December 7th, we will have a public hearing based on the direction provided to the staff on November 16th. And then the board that evening at their board action meeting will adopt their new map. So that gives us an idea on what the time frame looks going forward. So again, this just reiterates what we just talked about. The job on November 16th is to give staff direction on which map that the board will be adopting. And then again, we'll bring that forward on December 7th for a public hearing, a resolution, and adoption. So that concludes our presentation for this evening. And we are certainly open to questions. You can see I have our expert panel here, and of course, David, our demographer, on Zoom. So we are available and ready to answer any of your questions.
Thank you for that presentation and the documentation that was provided. That was also sent out via email with your agenda. So if you have questions regarding the presentation, it should be provided to you via email with the agenda that was submitted. To address a couple of things before we move forward, I see the message from Ms. Mark in the chat. So yes, you may continue to move forward as needed. So at your own time. But going to questions, I see Mr. Kimball's hand first. We'll go Mr. Kimball with your question. And then
First, I'd like to think that the school board will do their own thing. First, we already have a problem with the two at-large positions we have. It's been clearly demonstrated by the Civil Rights Act of 1965 that a large election is discriminatory, prevents the opportunity for minorities to be elected to office. You see, there's never been one on the county commission because of that. And I do disagree that the way that these districts are drawn, particularly with the Dunbar neighborhood, it was gerrymandered last time, drawn out into the river, a population that's not endeared to the predominant Dunbar community. The NAACP in their attempt was trying to improve where the community was moving toward colonial, moving toward Lehigh at that. But Brian Hellman and Frank Mann actually present a recommendation which was map 7 that was greatly supported by the League of Women Voters, the Black Caucus, the NAACP, and other leaders in the community who felt that the last time this was done unfair. And even with our school board, at some point, the school board needs to start to move in the direction of getting rid of those two at large. It does benefit the Republican Party. Very few Democrats are ever elected to office as a result of it. We had to change the single member of the school board to get 3 Democrats. We would not have got them otherwise. And I think that many people who are looking at the way the boundaries are drawn now, this county decided to go with 5, which we totally disagree with. 5 still gerrymanders. I believe that some of those people running for office, person that they could win under single member, people have the opportunity to hold that elected official accountable. When that person's not doing their job, they got a better chance of removing them from office. When that person spends his time campaigning in other areas to make sure they're elected to office and do not address the needs of their community. So the main 2 points that I'm making here is that we have to move in the area of single member district election in our school board totally and our county commission, and we need to listen to the African American community. Listen to the League of Women Voters. We're not satisfied with what the county did. Those 3 commissioners who were there showed no care for the needs and the desires of other people in the community other than their own constituents. I'm finished.
Good night.
Thank you, sir. We really appreciate it. I believe I saw Peter's hand up.
Yes, thank you so much. Once again, I echo Mr. Kibo's yes, this is very good and very thorough. But I have 2 questions actually. One of them is following up on Mr. Kibo. We have 7 board members. Why am I not seeing anywhere anything about moving to single member district? In other words, instead of 5 districts, what would be the problem of having 7 districts? That's my first question. I didn't see any map like that. I have not seen it in the county commissioners, where the school board has 7 and 2 of these will never be won by a minority, I assure you, they are at large. So, number 2, I think I would be very much in favor of either district, map 6 or map 7. I have no problem. I'll very much be in favor of 7, but if the 6 was adopted, I would go by it. Thank you. But I need to hear about why not 7 districts? Why do we have to stick to 5?
Okay, so that's a very good question, and the statute does allow for 7 single-member districts. But what would need to be done is that just like they did when they went to 5 single-member districts and 2 at large, the statute allows for 7 at-large members. What would need to be done is they would have to go back to the voters for a referendum to be able to change that. So we can't change that just by redrawing the map. It would have to go to the voters for them to vote to have 7 at-large members.
And is it not possible for them to do that on November 16th?
No, it's not enough time to be able to do everything that needs to be done to be able to bring this to the ballot.
But something that can be considered in the future.
Yes. Kathy,
I recommend it.
could you bring it up? We did bring it up at the board.
Yeah, and Ms. Vaughn and other board members did bring it up. This was a discussion that was brought up, and again, it was explained that yes, statutorily you can do it. However, it does need to go back to the voters for a referendum, and you have to go through that process to be able to get it on the ballot. They would have to do a resolution, and it would have to go through the supervisor of elections, and we'd have to do that entire process to be able to do that. So it cannot be done by December 31st. There's just no way. And remember, the redistricting can only be done in odd years pursuant to the statute.
So again, recommend Ms. Bruno to be done at the earliest possible time legally.
Peter, can you repeat your question? I just want to make sure we heard it.
No, I just wanted to say that whenever that is possible, we should have 7 single-member districts. And of course, Ms. Bruno, it will not be done in the next 2 months, but whenever it is legally possible, I would like it noted, recommend that it is done whenever the statutes are now.
Dr. Daniel, just for a point of clarification, you are stating that you want to make your recommendation that is done. Is that on behalf of EDAC? Just for clarification.
Well, Mr. Chairman, that would be I would make that, I'd rather make it as a motion, yes. But I would like to, let's have a little bit more conversation with other members of EDAC, so that, but I would still make it as a motion.
Okay.
Mr. President, Mr. Chairman, yes.
Mr. Kimball, is your hand?
Yes, one of the things that people talk about with the county commission, for example, they have to do a charter review to get that on the ballot. They have blocked that from getting on the ballot. Does that charter review for the county affect the school board the same way, in order to get it on the ballot? Or does the school board itself have to consider making the change like they did before and switching over from single to large? But the problem with the county, they have to do a charter review, and each time they block it from getting on the ballot for citizens to vote for.
The school board and the county are two different political subdivisions. So the school board can do what it sees fit to be done. It is not tied to the county. And then the one thing I just want to make sure that is clear, right now, we have 5 single-member districts and 2 at large. The option pursuant to the statute is to go to 7 at large. It would not be single-member districts, it will be 7 at-large board members.
Why would it be that? The public asked for 7 single member, because that's the same thing we're asking for the county.
Because
7 single member, never 7 at large with the legal women voters or the NAACP or the Black Caucus support that.
Because
So going back to large is going back to the discriminatory approach again.
Yes, because for the school board, we fall under Florida Statute 1001.36, and the statute dictates how we will be redistricted, and we can have 5 districts, single-member districts, we can have 5 single-member districts and 2 at large, or we can have 7 at large. It's very statutorily specific.
So this would have to be challenged on the state level.
Yes, if you want to change the statute, that's at the state level.
Okay.
Yes, sorry, Mr. Chairman, let me go through it. Ms. Bruno, I think it's very important to understand that we are moving towards single-member district, not towards at large.
But now,
So the idea of having 7 at large would be a disaster.
so Dr. Dinelli, that's what I'm trying to make sure that everybody understands, that pursuant to the statute for the school board, remember the school board falls under a different statute than the county, than the congressional districts, completely different statute. And for the school board statute, the options are 5 single-member districts, or you can have 5 single-member districts and 2 at large, or you can have 7 at large. That's statutorily prescribed. So to change that, it would take the Florida State Legislature to change the statute. We can't have 7 single-member districts.
Ms. Bruno, I want to recommend once again, my motion is to, whatever it takes, however long it takes, I would like 7 single-member districts.
Dr. Dinelli, I can't deliver something that's statutorily impossible for me to do.
No, I'm saying, there might be changes in the statutes and so many legal implications, not now, And I rightly said it cannot be done now, and Mr. Kiba explained what happened in the commission. But I'm saying, no matter how long it takes, I would like us to go back to seven single districts. It might take time, there might be legal changes, but that's my proposal and I stand by it.
So Mr. Dianu, just to clarify, that's a point of information that you want to pursue that if there are statutory changes, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct, Mr. Chairman.
I see Mr. Bendick and then, Mr. Paz.
Thank you. I couldn't figure out how to make the virtual hand come up. So I had to do it the old-fashioned way. I had a question just to clarify for Attorney Bruno. So I understand what you just said about the statute, but in order to go from the 2 at-large and 5 single-member, if you wanted to get rid of the 2 at-large hypothetically, let's say, that would require a referendum to remove the 2 at-large. Is that, I just want to make sure I
Yes.
understood that.
Yeah, anytime you're going to change the number of board members, that's gonna require a referendum.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bendick. Mr. Paz?
Good evening. So what I understand is like our options currently are bad or super horrible. So with that being said, I would like to second, even though this is not official, Mr. Dr. Dianu, motion to move to 7 single districts.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Paz.
You're welcome, sir.
So just for a point of clarification, what I'm hearing is that there is a recommendation that we move to 7 single districts. However, per the current statute, that is not allowable. So, Dr. Dianu, can you clarify what you're seeking? Is it just a point of information, or are you looking to make a motion?
Thank you. I'm making the motion, Dr. Blakely, because it's very important that I make this motion. No matter how long it takes, no matter what changes need to be made, the county should one day be a 7 single member district in the school district, and that is the motion I am making. It may take time, and I agree with Attorney Bruno that it may take time, it requires a lot of changes, but there's a path to it, which might only take time, it will not be done in the next 2 months, but my motion remains, we want to do everything possible, to do everything that can be done to make sure that one day we are a 7 member, single member district.
Sorry.
So what I'm hearing from Dr. Dianu is that he is placing a motion on the floor for the board to consider 7 single member district when allowed by Florida statutes. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, and that's what Mr. Paz supported. Second.
Mr. Chairman, if I may,
Yes.
just from a procedural standpoint, traditionally, when the committee offers recommendations, you all have been very specific in who or whom you're recommending to or for. So from a staff level, we would ask that you all be very specific. Are you recommending that the board take some action? Are you recommending that the board lobby for specific action that may be helpful for us from a recording standpoint? So what we're asking, if the committee goes forward with your motion, can you please, from a staff level, be specific in to whom is the recommendation supposed to affect? Are you asking the board to lobby, to create, or to do something? Thank you.
Mr. Indy, I may not be quite confident with the process, but I want to say whichever takes the shortest time.
So
So I think we just need to make sure to clarify the statements. Are you asking if the board will lobby for that? Or are you stating, we just need to clarify it.
I'm clarifying because I'm not quite conversant with what takes the shortest time, and I'm glad Madam Bruno is here. Whichever takes the shortest time of the 3 Jared has talked about, that is the path we should follow, because I would hope the soonest possible we have single member districts, 7 of them.
So Dr. Dianu, let me say a couple of things. One, is that the board has already chosen the issues for this legislative session. So that ship has already sailed for this year. The other thing is the appetite. I just came back from a Florida School Board Attorneys Association meeting, and I will tell you that the appetite to do anything right now with regards to advocacy in the school system is very low, given certain issues that have transpired. So I don't think, I just wanna be clear with you that it's quite possible that this is not something that's gonna happen this year at all, because that ship has sailed, and I know that right now Tallahassee does not have a lot of appetite to do anything for districts at this point. So we can certainly put it on the list, and then it will have to come to the board for them when they're discussing their new legislative priorities for next year. And I believe Ms. Vaughn had something she wanted to add to this discussion.
I need to speak.
I'd like to still hold the motion the soonest time possible.
Just a moment, Dr.
But let me just also say, in terms of the motion, we need to be very, very careful, because we cannot have a motion that is asking for something that cannot be delivered. So if the motion is to request or recommend to the board that they look into this when they're able to look into it, that's one thing. But if we're asking that, that we do this, obviously we cannot do that at this point because of the statute. Here's Ms. Vaughn.
I just wanted to say something that may clarify. I remember from last EDAC meeting, I believe that Mr. Kimball brought this up. And so when we had our discussion at the last board briefing, I brought this up and said, this is something that has come up in EDAC. And what we have done, because at that time, our attorney explained that, it can't be done at this point because it has to go to the voters and, all the other problems. However, I did ask for this issue to be put, we have a parking lot, which is a list of the topics that we want to bring forward, and probably this in a workshop. So I can tell you right now, I'm not trying to dissuade you from making a motion, but to make things easier, I can tell you that, don't know what month or exactly when this will happen, but it is on the list of things for us to talk about. And so at that time, we can talk about the things that have just been mentioned here. And we do our legislative priorities once a year. And again, as Mr. Preverno said, that ship has sailed a long time ago for this year. But if the board has an appetite for what you're saying, 7 single-member districts, and we endorse that idea, then the next step would be to take a look at putting this forth as a legislative priority. So it is on the radar, and again, I'm not trying to dissuade you from making your motion, but this is kind of out there already, so hopefully that helps.
Mr. Shep, can I make a clarification here, please?
One moment, please. I think I've seen 2 hands. I want to clarify, so one moment. Mr. Kimball, I see your hand, and Mr. Powell, I see your hand. Just want to clarify, you have
Mr. Chairman, for a second, and I would also like to note, you have 4 members of the committee that are in person with us. So maybe it might be helpful to yield to any members who are here with us in person who may have questions. Thank you, sir.
Yes. So I'll start with Mr. Kimball, Mr. Powell. If you don't have anything, I'll yield to those who are in person in the district.
Well, only thing
I lowered my hand.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Powell. Mr.
I
Kimball.
was just gonna help clarify what Peter was saying. Peter, I think that the closest thing that you're saying is to ask them to lobby. That means at some point they will consider this. And I think Betsy made it very clear. If they put it on the list and they recognize it's important, I think we can trust, and Ms. Bond particularly, to make sure that eventually is something discussed. And then next year we can bring this up again, with the discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Kimball.
Yes.
Dr. Neal, one moment, please. Dr. Neal, one moment, please.
Yes, I now want to make the motion very clear because of the confusion. I am making a
Dr.
motion.
Dr. Neal, one moment, please. I wanna make
Oh,
sure-
sorry, Dr. Blakely.
Now, I wanna make sure that people in the space, in the physical space.
Yeah, I apologize, yes.
So any questions? I believe we have a comment by Ms. House, and I'm gonna go over to her.
Thank you, good evening, this is Stephanie House. I too attended the county commissioners meeting this past week. And I was also disappointed with their choice of the map that they chose for redistricting, I beg your pardon. And I am a past member of the NAACP, so I know in the past, after the last census was taken, that we met with the school board numerous times, along with the Southern Coalition of Social Justice. And if anybody else is familiar with those meetings, you know that there was a pending lawsuit about the last redistricting. And that wasn't a favorable process. And it definitely dealt with the Dunbar community and the way that that districting worked. And with this last map, with this present map that the county has chosen, they want to pretty much do the same thing. One comment I made at that particular meeting, minority community doesn't want to go across the river again. That happened with the ancestors going through water. If anything, I agree with Mr. Kimball, that one map that they chose not to accept, if you choose to take any of these maps into consideration, which you also know, you don't have to choose any county map. But if you do, in my opinion, the most favorable one would be number 7. That map, that any other map, they want you to district with number 5 and number 4, which would put the Dunbar community into number 4 going across the river again. And that's not, and you might open yourself up to that lawsuit. And I said might, I'm not saying I have anything to do with that, okay? And as far as making single member districts right now, you see also with this census, the number of people that have increased in both districts, you look for yourself and you see where the increase is right now. Right now, I believe, and again, it's my personal opinion, for right now, you might want to table that discussion because as it's already been explained, that's going to be a state legislative action that needs to be taken. That's law, and that's something that has to be legislated, and it has to go before state legislation. And you might need additional legal personnel to help you with that written action. That's all.
Thank you. Any other further comments or questions from those meeting in person?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, you have 2, Mr. Bell and Mr. Burns.
All right, thank you.
Dr. Blakely, I just wanted to ask a question. I think it would be important for us to understand the process of what it's going to take to get what Dr. Dianui wants to get done. I heard part of the process and the time frame that it's going to take, but I think it's important for us to understand what that entails. And if we can get an idea, an outline of the process that we're going to have to go through to do what you're asking, I think that would be helpful.
Thank you for that feedback.
We have Mr. Bell.
Just briefly, this is Ryan Bell. I agree with Mrs. House that I believe the intentions are very good and valid. However, at this point, I believe it needs to be tabled. I think this is outside the scope of EDAC right now. I believe it's been explained very clearly that it's prohibited by Florida statute, which makes it practically irrelevant for the foreseeable future. And I believe the school board is already looking into this. So I think we should table this motion or this issue for now.
Thank you, Mr. Bell. Dr. Biannucci, would you be amenable to establishing this as a future agenda item for EDAC to discuss further about the strategies to best approach the consideration for single member district as a legislative priority? As we've been discussing, the legislative priorities have been established by the school board. Would you be amenable to having this as an agenda item to identify strategies about how to best approach it, similar to what Mr. Bell shared, as well as others?
Right. Dr. Blakely, in view of the conversation that you have just had, and we are agreeable to making some changes, but I still want this table, whether it is lobby, and no matter how long it is, and I know, like Mr. Bell mentioned and many other people mentioned, it might take some changes in the law, even Ms. House mentioned that, might take some changes, but it must start somewhere. It must start somewhere. So I still want to say, let's start the process, we just recommend it, and Dr. Blakely, I have no problem with it being discussed further later on to identify the implications, but I still want something noted that we moved a motion maybe to discuss this later on. Our job is to recommend to the board and we recommend it that it be done. Whether it's the lobbying, it doesn't have to be started right now. And as Ms. Bruno said, the appetite may not be there, but you have to start somewhere.
Correct. So I want to make sure we clarify the motion. As Ms. Bruno said, we can't move forward a motion that can't be addressed. So I'm asking, would you be amenable to establishing this as a future agenda item for us to discuss through EDAC to gain more information about how the process is for establishing our legislative priorities for the school board, as well as the strategies for legislation in the Florida statutes?
In view of that, Mr. Blakely, let me change the motion to request that in a future meeting very soon, Ms. Bruno, or I think particularly Ms. Bruno, to explain the consequences of changing or how the modality of becoming a single-member district. I would request that she comes to explain that as a major item in our discussions in future.
Thank you, Mr. David. And at this time, myself,
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Do you currently have a motion on the floor? I believe it was seconded by Mr. Paz, so the maker of the motion would have to withdraw that main motion before you proceed.
Yes, so that's what I was Mr. Biannucci, would you like to withdraw the initial motion?
No, I would like to, I'm actually modifying to request an explanation of how we can do the single-member school district in the future. We are not recommending now until we have more information from the school board member.
Okay,
The school board attorney.
so Dr. Denoui, the easiest way to do this is go ahead and withdraw your motion and then state, because if you do an amendment and all that, we're gonna get all confused, and trust me, I've been there, done that. So go ahead and withdraw your motion and then restate the motion that you want your colleagues to consider.
And then you Dr. Biannucci, in doing so.
Motion withdrawn, and I'll make a motion, the other motion then.
And then go
restate
your motion.
Withdrawn the motion, what else I want to state is that myself, as long with the board liaison and staff liaison, meet to discuss the agenda item, so we can discuss placing it as an agenda item for a future, identify a time frame. You said in the near future, so I want to clarify that.
Right. Let me rephrase that, let me give the power back to you, Mr. Shepard. I recommend that, I withdraw the other motion. I recommend that the staff liaison and the board liaison and the chairperson find a suitable time when Ms. Bruno can come and explain about how we can move, how the path that we can move towards a seven-member single district, 7 single-member district.
Okay, thank you. And just point of clarification for our staff liaison, Mr. Edie, as well as our general counsel, for that recommendation to discuss for agenda item, does that need to be moved forward with an official motion?
That's an official motion, Mr. Chairman.
I would say from the staff liaison standpoint, logistically, You, Dr. Blakely, and our board liaison have agreed to the topic and the balance of the things that you guys have discussed this year. So your docket is pretty much full, but at the next time you all meet, then of course, it's the committee's prerogative. So from my standpoint, we've lined up, based on the meetings that you all had at the beginning of the year, your topics for discussion. I don't know if Ms. Bruno has anything, since you mentioned her by name as well.
I'm always happy to come and talk to EDAC about any issue that you would like for me to talk to. We just need to coordinate and make sure that your staff liaison and the board liaison and your chairman have it on the agenda. And then I'll be more than happy.
Thank you.
Mr. Paz, I see your hand.
Just in support again of Dr. Dianui, if he was going to place a motion, I was going to second his new motion.
And actually, you're right, Mr. Paz, thank you so much. It was a motion and seconded by Mr. Paz.
So the motion on the floor is for the EDAC committee to consider as an agenda item for the balance in the near future to discuss the establishing the single member district as a legislative priority for the school board. Is that clarity, Mr. Dean?
You put it very well, Mr. Chairman.
So it was a motion moved by Dr. Dianui and seconded by Mr. Paz. Any further discussions? Any objections?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, from record keeping purposes, do you mind conducting a roll call vote since we have people in public and also via Zoom?
Yes, sir. And I would ask that our current secretary, Ms. Torres, give us the assist with the roll call vote.
Thank you, Dr. Blakely. Ms. Chris Fonte?
Yes.
Mr. Burns?
Yes.
Mr. Bell?
I oppose based on it being outside the scope of EDAC, and it's clear that this is a state legislative action and not a school board action.
Mr. Paz?
Yes.
Dr. Blakely?
I abstain.
Mr. Quisenberry?
I oppose. I feel like we need more information on the topic, and I think it's outside the scope of EDAC.
Ms. Marth? Ms. House?
I abstain.
Ms. Purdue? Mr. Kimball?
Yes.
Dr. Dianui?
Yes, please.
Mr. Bendeck?
Could you read the motion back for me, please? I missed what the last motion was. I want to understand exactly how it reads.
The motion on the floor is that the EDAC committee would consider discussing at a future meeting the topic of a 7 single member district.
I understood it to be the process of how that could be achieved, an explanation of how that could be achieved.
So I'll clarify what I have in my notes. So Dr. Dianui made a motion for a future agenda item for EDAC to discuss further about strategies to best approach consideration for the single member district as a legislative priority for the school board.
Okay, my vote is yes.
And Ms. Burrell?
Yes.
Your motion carries, Dr. Blakely, 7 to oppose, to abstain.
And thank you. We'll take that back to our next meeting with our board liaison, staff liaison, to identify the timing based on the calendar availability and the agenda items that we have committed to for the remainder of the year.
Thank you.
Any further questions or feedback from those who presented to us regarding the redistricting?
Mr. Chairman, I'm just curious, for the agenda item or discussion, are you all finished with your redistricting, or are you on the posture of offering a recommendation relative to one of the alternatives presented?
Yes, that's why I'm clarifying. Are there any additional questions to the presenters for the night before making any recommendations based on the information shared? Any further question or discussion? All right, are there any recommendations based on what the information was shared with the committee this evening?
Is there a way for us to get those maps, emailed to us or sent to us, so we have time to look at those and digest a little further? We do appreciate the work done by Davis Demographics, and it seems there's a lot of good information involved in what was done. I think that we need some time to compare the maps and information before we can make a sound judgment on what the outcome should be.
I will say, Vice Chair Quisenberry, I think that was shared without. However, there is a meeting scheduled, I can clarify that for November 16th with the school board, and with the time remaining in the calendar year where a decision will be made, we're coming up close to that time, that deadline, so.
Mr. Chairman, I believe you have a hand in person.
Mr. Kimball?
Yeah,
House?
I'd like to ask whether you get the maps or not, that, like they tell you in church, don't rely on your own understanding. If you are not knowledgeable about the district process, listen to leadership. Leadership, you got the NAACP involved, you got the League of Women Voters, you have the Black Caucus, and other leaders in the community who are working on this, who understand this very clearly. And I think in making your decision, that you always listen to what they have to say, and not rely on your own understanding.
Mr. Chairman, you have a hand in person, Ms. House.
Okay, yes. Ms. House?
Yes, sir. Well, again, along with Mr. Kimball, again, we were at the county, Lee County Board meeting this past Monday night. And for the gentleman that just asked about the maps are at the county's website, if you wanna just look them up there. And the one map that was even close to coming even into question about the proper representation, or what those other social organizations that he just mentioned were in favor of, was map number 7. And some of the people that opposed that for representation of, unfortunately, a lot of the minority groups, particularly in the Dunbar community, was map number 5. I'll just put that out there. You can get whatever you want from that. But the more favorable map was map number 7. If the school board chooses to go with any county map, and again, they don't have to. They could construct their own map. And pretty much I'll leave it at that.
Mr. Chairman, we have one comment from staff.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is Kathy Ebo, Director of Planning. Given the time constraints that we have to meet, that we have to adopt a map by midnight on December 31st. Last week, when we met with the school board, we explained to them it was at that point that we would need to know whether or not they wanted to go and have us work on our own maps and draft our own maps. The school board decided not to pursue that, and given that our time frame and the amount of time that it takes to draft new maps, Davis Demographics has let us know that It is not possible at this point for us to change course and create our own maps. So given the direction that we received from the school board last week, at which time we could have created our own maps, we would have had time and we had established a schedule by which that we could have adopted our own maps in that time frame. That they chose not to go that route and they chose to decide to pick, although they didn't tell us which and didn't give us an indication of which one may be more preferred. That they did choose that they believe that one of the 7 maps that has been established by the county could be a map that we would use. That is the course of direction that we are at this point having to pursue. We just do not have the time to do the drafting and do the public hearing process the way it needs to be done at this point to go with our own maps. Unfortunately, that decision was made last week and we have to stay that course.
Thank you for that information. With that information to share, are there any recommendations from the committee based on the maps and information that was provided today? Would you like to make a recommendation to the board?
I believe we have a hand in person, Mr. Chairman. I see Ms. House.
Okay, we'll go, Mr. Kimball has a hand in this house.
I would make a motion that we consider map 5, which is one that was strongly supported by Brian Hammond and
No, it wasn't.
and all those
Map
groups of the community.
Seven.
Seven, excuse me, not 5.
Whoa.
7, excuse me. Yeah, no, I don't wanna make that mistake.
No, you
That's the
don't.
problem.
No, you
Five is what we
don't.
have already. I don't wanna stay where we are. So 7, that's supported overwhelmingly by all of the different groups of the community who are trying to make sure that we seek equity. Those other maps, the maps that's considered by the county, is what we already have, is gerrymandering, and is not seeking equity.
So we have a motion from Mr. Kimball, to recommend for consideration map 7, the alternative map 7.
I'll second it. Stephanie House.
Seconded by Amy. Are there any discussion? There was a hand in the room, is discussion, on the recommendation?
And I just wanna know how, when else will we ever have a chance to vote?
We have a question from Ms. House.
Can we have a look at that map 7 again, because the PowerPoint is still there.
Mr. Chairman, you have a question before Dr. Dianui. Ms. House has the floor with the question.
Yes, Ms. House?
Well, I beg your pardon, but again, Mr. Kimmel and myself, I know are familiar with map 7. We've had a chance to look at it. And I'm not sure if everyone else has had a chance to look at all the maps. So I would be in favor, I said I was in favor of it, but if we didn't vote, if everybody didn't agree on map 7 tonight, when would there be another chance for everybody to express it? Because I know there's a deadline. I already knew that the county's deadline was coming up quickly. If you don't vote on your map tonight, when would you have a chance to meet again or to vote on it?
January. This is your last chance. This is the last chance.
Your last chance.
Yes, so this will be an opportunity to make a recommendation to the board. Again, they meet on the 16th, so we would not meet prior to that, so this will be an opportunity to make a recommendation. So currently, we have a motion on the floor from Mr. Kimball to consider alternative map 7, was seconded by Amy. And Peter, you have a comment?
Can I interject for just a second, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
In terms of the time frame, just so that we're all clear as to what we will be doing moving forward, at next Tuesday's briefing, we will have another workshop with the board to go through the 7 maps and identify which of the 7 they are proposing to approve. We are scheduled to adopt our maps at the board meeting on the 7th. However, if there was need, based on community input and comment, that we had to move to another workshop date or another briefing board date, we are able to have a special hearing on December 14th?
That was going with the county.
Oh, no, okay, so no, I've been corrected by Dr. Carlin. It is December 7th. December 7th is the date that we will adopt our new maps. So the November 15th is when, 16th is when we will review and determine hopefully a direction, and then December 7th is adoption day.
Thank you for the update on timelines. Just a reminder, we have a motion on the floor from Mr. Kimball, who's been properly moved and seconded. Currently we have a discussion, Mr. Dean.
Well, I just want to look at the map. What I wanted to say in the discussion is, map 7 is probably the most balanced. No district is too far, like some district 5, which is like 700 people, 800. Nobody else is too far from the magic number of 152, 164. That justifies why I support that motion.
All right, thank you. Any further discussion? At this time, I'll ask our secretary, Ms. Torres Diaz, to assist with the roll call vote. Again, the motion on the floor is for, as a recommendation from EDAC to the board to consider alternative map 7 in their November 16th workshop.
Again, the motion on the floor is for the board to consider alternative map number 7 during their upcoming workshop. Roll call vote, Ms. Chris Fonte.
Yes, yes.
My apologies. Mr. Burns,
Yes.
Mr. Bell,
Yes.
Mr. Paz,
Yes.
Dr. Blakely,
Yes.
Mr. Quisenberry,
Yes.
Ms. House,
Yes.
Mr. Kimball,
Yes.
Dr. Danui,
Yes, please.
Mr. Bendeck,
Yes.
and Ms. Burrell.
Yes.
Dr. Blakely, your motion carries with no objections.
All right, thank you to the committee for that recommendation to the board. I also want to thank our representative, Dr. Carlin, Chief of Staff, and our General Counsel, Ms. Dupree, and all representatives. Any other final comments before we move on to our next agenda item from our board members or area redistricting?
No, sir. Thank you for your
Thank you
feedback.
again. At this time, we'll move to our board member update from our board liaison.
I can bring it to you, Ms. Fonte.
Oh, I got it over there, whatever's easier. Okay, everybody, thumbs up if you can hear me, everybody's good? I guess, okay, let me go over, on my board reports, and I just shuffled the paper underneath a bunch of things. All right, so first of all, to follow up on superintendent search, because I know that was, important last time. Don't have an update because, Rand Associates, our national search firm, is continuing to receive applications, and we won't be getting information back from them yet, but I will have something for our next meeting. Oh, do we meet? We don't meet in December, do we?
No.
We don't, so the information will be coming out. I'm very thankful that the entire redistricting group came back in and gave this presentation. Hopefully, everybody feels good about the fact that the idea of the 7 single-member districts is on our radar, will be discussed, and don't, rest assured that all of that is going to happen. I wrote down some notes as you were discussing, you're looking at the various maps, and I will most definitely on the 16th bring forward your recommendation, the recommendation from EDAC unanimously, like number 7. The other thing is, on the 16th, it is a board briefing, and when you have that hasn't been changed, has it? Mr. Krueger and I still have it down as a briefing, because some people were talking about a workshop.
What date?
On the 16th. Somebody mentioned workshop, but I think the workshop is the 15th.
It's a briefing.
It is a briefing, okay. That's what I thought, that nothing had changed there. And you can bring forward, if you want, as individuals, if any of you want to reiterate anything as individuals, but certainly I will be bringing back this from EDAC. The other thing is, there've been some questions from the members about what I was charged with bringing forth at our last school board meeting, or following our last EDAC meeting. One of the recommendations from the board, from EDAC, was that board member Chris Patrica consider resigning from the board, and I did bring that forward at the meeting, and it was just a recommendation, a consideration. The second, and this is reflected in the minutes, if you, for those of you who weren't here or can't remember, I'm just going back into the minutes on another recommendation from a unanimous motion by the committee, was to condemn statements from board member Patrica toward Guatemalan students and recommend that the board take every possible action to hold board member accountable, not to be limited to a vote of no confidence and an official recommendation. Okay, following that, before our meeting, I did have discussions with our board attorney, Ms. Dupree-Bruno, and followed her counsel on what was brought forth here. Do you want to, can you summarize what you told me, which is why I will tell you what came out of that, because it didn't come out exactly the way the committee asked because of legal counsel. So I'm gonna put that on Attorney Dupree-Bruno.
So it's my understanding that the recommendation was to have a vote of no confidence, which would be akin to a censure. And in this particular case, let me be very clear, there are times when boards are censured or board members are censured, that does happen. However, in this particular case, the reason for the censure was because of a statement that was made by the board member. And there are cases that indicate that you cannot censure somebody based on their speech, especially a public official who has very broad latitude in their First Amendment rights. So that is why I counseled the board to be very careful and not to move forward on a censure based on First Amendment speech, because I do know that there's a federal case where it was decided that you cannot do that, and that case is currently under review by the United States Supreme Court. So that is something that I caution the board, because that could expose the board and the district to liability for violating a public official's First Amendment rights. Censuring does occur, but it does not occur under that particular fact pattern or fact scenario.
Okay, so thank you. The board did have a vote that was based on investigation, and what we asked Mrs. Dupree-Bruno to do was to draft a letter to the governor. And the letter, this is just a draft of the letter. It was October 28th, 2021, to the Honorable Governor Ron DeSantis. And it was, Dear Governor DeSantis, please be advised that on October 19th, 2021, the Lee County School Board voted to request that you investigate and provide guidance on the perception that a board member has systemically and consistently abused her position. They are also seeking guidance on how they can hold this member accountable. They would appreciate you looking into this matter and advising of the same. If you have any further questions, please do not hesitate to contact me. And this was signed from our board attorney, Mrs. Kathy Dupree Bruno. Okay, so that draft letter was, as I said, brought to the board. And there was discussion, and there was discussion, and the bottom line on how all of this turned out was, there was input and there was no agreement. I finally made the motion to go ahead and send the letter as written. However, my motion was not seconded, so that motion died, and that's where this whole thing wound up. And I think Mrs. Dupree Bruno has a little more input on that.
So, on that date, there was a lot of discussion amongst the board members with regards to the recommendation from EDAC. And the original motion that was made by board member Gittens was to contact the governor's office to at least see what recourse we may have and to looking into this, at least see what recourse we may have and to looking into it, an abuse of power, or what is there anything that could be done. I know we can't sanction, but what are our possibilities, what can be done? So that motion was reworded, and so the final motion that was made was to contact the governor regarding a board member's systemic, consistent abuse of position and accountability for actions. That motion was passed 4-2. Then the board took a consensus to ask me to draft the letter. And then the letter that was drafted, Ms. Vaughn, I don't have it right in front of me, could you restate that letter again?
You want me to read it again?
Yes, please.
Okay.
So just again, the motion that was made was to contact the governor regarding a board member's systemic, consistent, abusive position and accountability for actions.
Okay, and the text of the letter reads, please be advised that on October 19th, 2021, the Lee County School Board voted to request that you, and again, this is directed to the governor, investigate and provide guidance on the perception that a board member has systemically and consistently abused her position. They're also seeking guidance on how they can hold this member accountable. They would appreciate you looking into this matter and advising of same. If you have any further questions, please do not hesitate to contact me. And again, this is signed from our attorney.
So one thing that I would add to that, it's basically a reflection of the motion that was made. My ethical boundaries stop there because I cannot prosecute one of my own clients. So I did advise the board if they wanted something that was more in detail, that they would have to get conflict counsel pursuant to my ethical obligations pursuant to the bar rules. And Ms. Vaughn at that point made a motion to forward this letter to, did you make a motion? I requested it.
I went ahead because we could not, there was a lot of discussion and there really was no agreement. And finally, I decided that I would put it forth in a motion to just go ahead and send the draft, make that into the final version and send it as written. However, my motion died there because there wasn't even a second. So that is where that all wound up. But I just wanted to put that forward to all of you. Just hang on one second, Peter. I wanted to just put it all forward because I know there were a couple questions requesting that I go ahead and, summarize. And as I said, there was a lot of discussion. So you may want to go back and listen to the meeting, but just in terms of what the committee asked me to do, that's the summary of how all of that turned out. And, you need to keep in mind that as the liaison, I bring forward in good faith everything that you would like me to bring forward. But remember, these are just recommendations from the committee. And certainly the board is aware of the fact that this was a unanimous vote from the EDAC members. But again, in the end, it is a board decision. So that's where it all stands.
Thank you, Doug. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. D'Amelio, I'll ask you a
Yes.
question. I'll actually hold your question to make sure that Member Vaughn has finished her statement, so.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Any other?
Here I am leaning back in the chair, and that was, really, we have spent a lot of time also in this interim. The redistricting has been something that's been on our minds, and we've had a lot of discussion on that. So these are the major things that have transpired, I would say, in the past month since the last EDAC meeting.
Thank you, Ms. Vaughn.
You're welcome.
Dr. D'Amelio.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Ms. Betsy, I'm glad about your presentation, particularly in front of Ms. Bruno. I hope Ms. Bruno, you're still here, right? I need to make a few things a little bit clear. For the sake of your own individuality, if there is a recommendation by either EDAC or by the board, I hope it can still be led verbatim. Now, I will talk about the two motions we made. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure whether the motions we made were exactly the way they are presented to the board. And that is something I need to ask you, I need to ask the board liaison, Mr. Board. Two, that conversation between Betsy and Kathy is very important, but still it was not necessary because either there was a motion made by one board member when Gittens. That motion should have been, because it was passed by the board, should have been the one in the letter. I have not had that read. I wrote to the writer, I need that motion read out here. If Betsy can read that motion that Gwen read, so that we see whether what Kathy presented was exactly as directed by the board. Could you do that, please?
So there's two questions here, so let's need to clarify. There's the first question from Dr. D'Amelio was in relation to the recommendation from EDAC, the board, and not read verbatim. I think Ms. Vaughn has shared that in consultation with our general counsel, that they would not be able to move forward with it as stated because it could provide some liability for legal reasons for imposing the First Amendment of a public official. Do you need further clarification from that?
Yes, let me clarify. And because Ms. Bruno mentioned something there, we were not asking for censure because of speech. We were asking for censure because of discrimination. Those are very different issues. The censure was based on discriminating against a particular group of students, not on what the person talked about. It is the content of the speech, not what she said. We can't stop speech. We are against discrimination.
Let's go to the first question first, and then come back.
Yeah, and Mr. Chair, if I can just clarify something, I bring back to the board exactly what the motion was, and I brought it back word for word.
Thank you.
Absolutely word for word. and I did not make great elaboration on it. So, you're, right now, frankly, you're bringing up some things that, were not in that motion. The motion made by, Ms. Gittens was, to contact the governor regarding a board member's systemic, consistent abuse of position and accountability for actions. Okay, it was by Winetta Gittens and seconded by Melissa Giovanelli. Okay, and
that's all we can, I think, Kathy, I listened to your letter, it was read twice here. And the only thing that I had missing there from the motion was abuse of power. And I would recommend that that's added and then it is sent, because that's the motion. And I think the board attorney's responsibility is to pass the motion as it is reflected by the board.
So I will just say that the word abuse of power was not utilized in the motion that actually passed. It was abuse of position, which is what was actually passed. There was discussion about abuse of power, there was all kinds of discussions. If you watch the tape, you'll hear all the discussions. But what ended up being passed was to contact the governor regarding a board member's systemic, consistent abuse of position and accountability for actions. That is the motion that the board passed.
Is that what the letter you had included?
So hold on a second, let me find the letter.
the one I just read?
That's all, there should be no debate about it, if that's what you included in your letter.
Okay, hold on, Miss Vaughn is getting the letter.
The one you read twice?
Twice?
Yes.
Either, she read it twice.
Third time's a charm.
I'd be there.
Hang on, pull it up.
Third time?
All right.
I think Ms. Vaughn has the letter.
This is, one more time, this is the letter, and it's addressed to Governor DeSantis. Please be advised that on October 19th, 2021, the Lee County School Board voted to request that you investigate and provide guidance on the perception that a board member has systemically and consistently abused her position. So I think from what you're asking, the word position was substituted here for power. And all right, so they are also seeking, they, meaning the school board, also seeking guidance on how they can hold this member accountable. They would appreciate you looking into this matter and advising of same. If you have any further questions, please do not hesitate to contact me. And again, it's signed by our board attorney.
And the promise that Ms. Bruno comes back, I wanted to say, sorry, Mr. Chairman, I wanted to say, I think the letter seems to read what the motion was, and I think everything should be proper and should be passed on to the governor as it was recommended.
The motion stated was in the letter.
But what I said before was, there was lots of discussion on this, and that, what you're saying was not adopted by the board. After lots of discussion, I brought that forward, and it was not seconded. So with all due respect, again, EDAC makes recommendations. I, to the best of my ability, bring the exact recommendations to the board, and it's up to the board to make the final decision. And so that decision was made. That letter, there was no resolution to the discussion, and the board didn't want that particular letter to be sent because I didn't get a second on it. So it's,
So I'm moving
with all
on
due
to-
respect, that's it on that motion. I don't know what else to say.
I'm moving a motion, Mr. Chairman, that the board reconsiders, because right now we're in a stalemate, we are not sending anything to the governor, that the board reconsiders its decision to make sure that a letter is sent to the governor to proceed with what we are recommending.
And that's up to EDAC, it's not up to me. At this point, I
I'm
have
just
brought
making a
that,
motion, Ms. Wan.
so your chair needs
I'm
to
making a
take
motion,
over.
Ms. Wan.
Okay, your chair needs to take over at this point.
Yes.
Thank you.
Right, I'm asking Mr. Chairman, that you
Yes.
make a motion to recommend to the board, that they pass on that letter to the government. Right now, we have nothing.
So can you clarify your motion? Your motion is to recommend that the board passes on the letter that was read this evening to the governor?
Yeah, that was drafted to the governor because it is in line with the motion. That's what I'm saying. Otherwise, what else do we have now?
Can I get clarification from our district that this letter has not been distributed to the governor or there's been?
It's not. It is not. Again, I made the motion, there was no second, it died.
That's why we are saying we need to revisit that. And
Well,
Mr. President is there, but Mr. Chairman.
Again, one more time,
Let's hear it in.
let me say is board,
100% second this motion, and I would even take that a step further. This is the EDAC, the Action Committee, not the Discussion Committee. We're talking about one word, power or position. There is no room for racism in the school district and in the board and in this committee. I do not want to be a part of this committee if she's still around. I would not want to return to our next meeting in January if no action has been taken against this board member that not only insulted Guatemalans, but Hispanics and minorities. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman. I support you, Mr. President. I know you are supporting my motion, but there's a lot of
Yes, I am.
stuff that is in.
One moment, please. Dr. Minogue, you have the floor.
Mr. Chairman, you have several hands in person here. Would you like to go to some of the
Yes.
people in person?
So we'll go with in person. If everyone who's not speaking right now, if you can mute your mics, please.
Good evening, everyone. I just wanted to say that I did attend the last board meeting, and I thought Ms. Vaughn did a good job presenting this on our behalf. I don't think we can force board members to take a position that they're not going to take. So I think reconsidering, asking them to to send it again, I totally agree with Mr. Paz. Let me make sure I say that, because actually I was there to present a personal matter that involves racism towards my daughter. But again, there's only so much one can do. And I just wanted to make it clear that Ms. Vaughn really did what we had asked of her.
Anybody else in person? Mr. Chairman, you have Ms. House.
And I have to agree with Ms. Christine. You cannot fire a board member. They are elected to their positions. Ms. Vaughn did what we asked her to do, and she did it verbatim as a request was made at our last meeting. That's why I stressed verbatim. Read it as we requested it, and that's what she did. And once again, at that meeting, you can't fire a board meeting. And if you watch that YouTube video that we were requested to watch, you see Ms. Patrica is not going to be accountable for anything she does. If she's not accountable to her public, if you saw that, she walked out of the board meeting when it came time for her to be held accountable. If she's not going to be accountable to her fellow board members, do you think she's going to be accountable to EDAC right now? She's not going to follow what she's being asked to do.
Thank you. And from, Mr. Bendick and then Amy.
And Mr. Chairman, as a note, you have one additional comment in person when you get a moment, sir.
Okay, we'll stay within person, sorry.
Mr. Burns.
I would just like to add that as an EDAC committee, we only have so much latitude. All we can do is make recommendations. We can't empower anybody to do anything. Our job is to make recommendations, and what happens with those recommendations are not based on us. It's based on the people we present it to, and then they make the decisions. And once the decision is made, it's made. So we can't force them to do anything. So my recommendation is tonight is just, it's been done, dealt with, and let's move on.
Thank you for your comment, Mr. Burns. Mr. Bendick.
I was looking for some clarification. My understanding was that the motion that the school board passed was a motion to ask the governor to look into a systemic, consistent, abusive position and accountability for actions of a board member. So if that was the motion that passed, how was that going to be forwarded? I understand about the letter and I guess that isn't happening or won't happen. But so I guess what does that motion that I just read, which I understand is the motion that passed, what exactly does that motion mean with respect to asking the governor to look into it? Or I don't understand for clarification as to what the interpretation is of the school board's motion.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, can you stop sharing, please? The map.
I have screen control, but we're gonna make that happen, so just a moment. So we had a question, now I think the best appropriate for our district official or Ms. Kathy Bruno to answer. The motion that passed, where is that going?
Can you please repeat the question?
Okay, so my understanding is that the motion that passed, and I'm gonna read it the way that I understand it passed, is, quote, a motion to ask the governor to look into a systemic, consistent abusive position and accountability for actions of a board member. So I also understand that this letter to the governor wasn't sent. So how does the board that passed this motion by, I think it was it?
4-2.
Yeah.
4-2.
How do they interpret the meaning of that motion? What are they gonna do to move that motion forward? I just want some clarification as to, if they passed it, what do they intend to do about it?
So the motion is still on the table, the motion did pass. They did a consensus for me to draft the letter to effectuate the motion. The letter was drafted and there was concerns about the letter. After a long discussion, Ms. Vaughn made a motion to go ahead and send the letter. And there was no second to that motion, so it just died. At this point, the board, there is a motion that's out there. It's really up to the board in terms of which direction they're going to go because they decided not to move forward with the letter that was drafted.
So just for point of clarification, the motion that died was the motion to send the letter. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, but the motion that passed is still out there and the board has not taken any action in furtherance of whatever that motion means. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Amy, you had your hand up first.
Yeah, and so just to be very clear, nothing on paper, nothing on record for the comments that that particular board member made in regards to the Guatemalan children that she's supposed to be representing, correct? Nothing has been done.
No, incorrect. So when this came out with the statement, the following meeting, and it was the first meeting in October, there was a lot of discussion during the briefing, and I can't remember the date, but the first briefing in October where the board discussed their concern about the statement. The board discussed that individuals in the community needs to understand that the statement was not a reflection of the board or the district. And during the recess between the briefing and the action meeting, Ms. Vaughn and I drafted a statement reflected. Ms. Vaughn, do you have that statement? Because maybe we can read that statement.
I'm not sure that I can pull it up here.
Oh, it was emailed to the committee, so they.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
So like if.
Oh, that's right,
if somebody can pull that statement up and maybe we can read it. A statement was drafted that specifically indicated a distance from that statement, as well as the commitment of the school board to support all of our children, regardless of race, ethnicity, national origin, sexual orientation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That statement was then released to the media, and I do believe it was reported on by Wink News, because I do think that Wink News reported on it. So the board did make a very strong statement condoning the statement regarding the Guatemalan
Condemning.
Condemning, very clear, condemning the statements that was made by board member Patrica, and signed another statement reaffirming their commitment to non-discrimination and the inclusiveness of all of its students and staff. And that letter was signed by all 7 board members to include board member Patrica, and that was distributed to the community.
Mr. Chairman. One moment, please. Amy still has the floor. I'll make sure her question was clarified.
I do feel like the question was clarified. I feel like the board distanced themselves from her statement, but that there is no real action or accountability to said board member, right? Because the children are not any more protected, and that entire community doesn't have they can't see any action being taken by the school board to hold their member accountable. Not even a letter on her record. The letter went out to the community talking about how they're gonna do better and be better, but they're not really doing anything to be better, right? So I kind of stand with the group that are saying maybe we should have another motion and send it to them just to let them know, because it's not about me thinking that Ms. Vaughn hasn't done her job. Of course she's done it, and she's been excellent, and it's a tough thing to take a motion that people don't care about in front of them again. But I think it's important that they know that we care about it and we haven't forgotten, and that people are still showing up at our meetings and looking at us and asking us to hold the board accountable. And for the board to just disregard that, then they should know and have to say, yes, we are going to disregard that again. That's all.
Yes.
And yeah.
But before this,
Mr. Chair, Mr. Daniel, can you, 1 second, Ms. Vaughn is responding to what was just shared, so. Can I have Ms. Daniel's hand first?
And I appreciate everything that y'all are saying, and I personally, and I'm not talking for the board, I'm talking about me as a person, agree. However, that's not my role. And I really appreciate everybody who has said thank you, and Ms. Vaughn did represent the committee. At this point, again, I'm the liaison, I will do what you ask, but at this point, I think this has kind of run its course. Unless there's something new that you want to bring up. I'm gonna pass it back to our attorney.
Mr. Chairman, please, let me comment on here.
Hold on,
Right now, Mr. Dennis, one second.
hold on, here is the statement, here is.
Based on,
Sorry, Mr. Kimball, our general counsel.
okay,
Sorry, Mr. Kimball.
Here is the statement that was drafted by the board and disseminated to the community and to the media. The members of the school board of Lee County believe that public schools and elected officials have a responsibility to ensure the highest ideals of inclusion and that human dignity is upheld at all levels of public education. In that light, we are saddened by the recent public remarks of one of our members. It is important for the public to understand that neither the law nor board policy allow for one individual board member to speak for the entire board. There are 7 of us that make up the school board of Lee County. When an individual board member makes comments, those are the person's personal comments and should not be deemed reflective of the board in its entirety. When the school board speaks, we do so as a united board. We as members of the Lee County School Board stand steadfast in our commitment to foster an inclusive, educational environment where the Guatemalan community and all communities are treated with dignity and respect by all members of the educational community, including their elected representatives. The School Board of Lee County is committed to being a world-class school system and to ensuring that each student, without regard to race, ethnicity, religious belief, national origin, disability, ancestry, socioeconomic status, gender, or sexual orientation, achieves his or her highest personal potential.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Kimball has the floor, Mr. Dennis.
based on what Mr. Bendick said, he made it very clear that he made a clear motion to send, to ask for an investigation, but they did nothing. What can we do as a body to say that we're not satisfied with that? And I think that's what we're trying to say. That it's not enough to vote to investigate and do nothing. And I'd like to go on record if we can make a motion that the board is not satisfied with the fact that this committee is not satisfied with the fact that the board made a motion to investigate, but did not.
There's a motion on the floor.
All right. Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Dr.
is it my turn now?
One moment, I want to clarify, Mr. Kimball, are you making a motion for it?
Yeah, I want to know if it's possible, unless there's another way to do it, but I think it's very clear that we're not satisfied with the action. And, that they didn't consider strongly our recommendation, and then they went halfway to actually make a recommendation for an investigation and not do anything. So what good is it that they made a recommendation and did nothing but a bunch of rhetoric? So I think that from this board, what I'd like to make a motion is the board, that the EDAC board is not satisfied with the action of the board to first make a recommendation for an investigation and then do not follow it up.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
Mr. Chairman,
from the staff standpoint here, there is a motion on the floor. Dr. Bianui's motion, it was properly seconded, and I believe that's where you all were in discussion on the main motion, relative to Mr. Kimball saying about an additional motion. If I recall correctly, there is a motion currently on the floor that was seconded, and you all were in the position of discussing.
Thank you, Mr.
Right.
Kimball.
Mr. Chairman, can I proceed? I've been hearing to do as you can see.
Yes, Dr. Bianuis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to retrace back, address what. We have no business being in this committee if you are going to ignore those students, if you are not going to take action. Emmett, thank you for your words. It is wrong. for us to take it here. And then we say, oh, they did not do anything, goodbye. Yes, Mr. Lotofik, we need to tell them they need to be held accountable for the sake of those students. It's more important now than ever before to tell them we need to take action as you are directed by a committee of the school district EDAC. It is for those students. Right now, we cannot dismiss it like that. The motion should go very strongly that the board must send out that letter to the school, to the governor. They had voted for it. Why they retreat? Amy, thank you. Andres, thank you. People, thank you. We have a business for the children. And this is very upsetting. For us, talk is very easy. We can go on talking, but you must take action, and action time is now. Otherwise, you have no business being in this committee. Thank you, Andres, for your words.
So Dr. Daniel, for clarification purposes, your motion is to recommend that the board moves forward with disseminating the drafted letter.
Yes.
So the motion on the floor from Dr. Dianui is that the board, the recommendation from the EDAC committee is that the board moves forward with disseminating the letter that was drafted. It was seconded by Mr. Paz. Any further objections or discussion? If not, we'll move forward with a roll call vote. We have Ms. Amy, yes.
I'm sorry, keep jumping in here, but is there, I'd just like to ask Mrs. Bruno if she has any recommendations on something or a way that we could move forward legally to help hold her accountable and help the board to hold her accountable. Something that's not gonna just, die or something that's not going to open us up to liability. Do you have any ideas other than us voting to send the letter?
So here's what you're facing. This is a public official. Their boss are the constituents. The board is not the boss of any board member. And the only way for a public official in this capacity to be removed is for the governor to remove that person or for the next election cycle. This is not somebody that you can do anything else with because this is an elected public official. I think if I'm sorry?
Dr. Daniel, can you allow us to finish, please? Thank you.
The board, it's up to the board if they want to send the letter. If EDAC wants to make that recommendation again, Ms. Vaughn can bring it to the board and the board can decide. I also think that probably, honestly, the best thing is for the board member to come here and talk to EDAC. And EDAC tells the board member, this is what we think, here's what the problem is, and we need you to answer for your actions. And I think that's, and to ensure that the board member understands the pain that was caused to the Hispanic community, and particularly the Guatemalan community, but it's not just the Hispanic community or the Guatemalan community, it's all of the communities of children who are minorities. So I think this is this committee's job to ensure that the district abides by equity and diversity and tries to be as inclusive as possible. So that board member needs to come and talk to this committee and listen to what this committee's concerns are. So those are the two things. You can have Ms. Vaughn bring it back to the board, see if they wanna have an appetite at this point to send a letter. But I think more importantly is for the board member to come and talk to this committee.
Thank you, Ms. Bruno. Mr. Bendick.
Just a couple of comments. First, my understanding is that the school board has no process for which to address situations such as these. I understand that only the governor can either remove a board member or investigate a board member. But there is no process, is my understanding, for the school board to rebuke another school board member for conduct. So I would like to add to the motion that the school board adopt a process by which to address situations like this and take actions such as condemning or rebuking the actions of fellow school board members. I understand that the action may be ceremonial, but nevertheless, I think it's important that there be a process to address situations like this in the future. Two, my understanding is that the governor is the only one that holds the power to order an investigation. So what I don't understand is that if the board passed a motion, the school board passed a motion to investigate, and the governor's the only one that can order that investigation, why are they not moving forward on their motion? They passed it, we didn't pass it, they passed it. They should move forward on take action to move forward on their motion. And three, Attorney Bruno, frankly, I don't really see the purpose of the board member coming here and speaking to us. That the action, the issue is how to address her conduct. And I just really don't know how beneficial it would be to have that board member address our committee. Maybe my fellow members here disagree, but I just don't see a lot of benefit from it.
So the first thing I would say is when this board has had a lot of discussions about how to hold its members accountable. And they've had a lot of discussions based on all kinds of things that have happened. And they have taken the position that they will not rebuke or investigate or anything like that against each other. Now, I will say that if there is a concern about a board member's conduct, then what you stated before EDAC, the appropriate way is the vote of no confidence, which is a censure. That is the most that you could possibly do in this particular scenario. But the problem that you run into is because what you are concerned about in terms of the censure would be regarding the words that were spoken by this board member. And that's the distinction, is that there are cases, federal cases, that state that a public official has very broad First Amendment rights. So if you censure them because of what they said, you are opening the district to liability. So that's the first thing. Again, you can make a recommendation. There's a motion on the floor at this time to recommend that Board Member Vaughn go back and talk to the board about sending the letter as drafted. So that's definitely something. And I just want to clarify, my recommendation isn't that the board member come and speak to EDAC. My recommendation is that the board member come and listen to EDAC to see what was the problem and why EDAC was so concerned. It's not for the board member to come and justify their action, but rather for EDAC to hopefully enlighten and explain, this is why we are so concerned about this statement, and this is why we are taking the steps that we're taking. So, but otherwise, there really isn't anything else that a board can do against a public official. There just really isn't anything that can be done except for the censure, which I would not recommend doing under these circumstances because of the law.
Mr. Chairman.
One moment, Mr. Bennett, are you satisfied with Any further comments?
Thank you for that explanation, so I understand that then they have considered, adopting this process, but have decided not to move forward in that direction, but, my recommendation would still be, that they send the letter. And frankly, I get what you're saying about, thank you for clarifying your comments about, having the board member listen, but frankly, I mean, we're talking about a community that's been outraged by these comments. So if that hasn't enlightened this particular board member at this point, I don't really know what extra benefit listening, to us talking about it is gonna provide, but I appreciate the suggestion nevertheless.
So, Dr. Dianui, is we a motion to, have Ms. Vaughn as the board liaison to return to the school board and ask that the letter that was drafted be disseminated. There has been a request for amendment to include by Mr. Bendick, to include the board considering adoption of a process to address actions on becoming a school board official. Are you going to accept that amendment to your motion?
Yes, and I would like to add in view of what the school board attorneys, and maybe consideration of a vote of no confidence in the same motion.
Okay, so you got the parliamentarian here, you can't do it that way, let's do it this way. Let's first vote on.
There are three parts of this.
Okay, well, let's vote it one by one. So the first motion, in my understanding, please correct me if I'm wrong, is to recommend that board member Vaughn go back to the board and ask the board to send the letter that was drafted by council. Is that correct, Dr. Dinwiddie? Is that the motion? That's the first motion.
That's very correct. And then,
Okay, and it was second.
Mr. Bendick's point.
Okay, well, hold on, because we get really complicated when we start doing these amendments. So now we have, it's
Okay,
been
let's do it one by
seconded,
one.
let's go ahead and vote on that one motion at this time.
There's motion by Dr. Dianui, second by Mr. Paz, Secretary Torres Means, can you go roll call vote?
Yes, Dr. Blakely. So for the motion that's currently on the floor that recommends that the board move forward with disseminating the letter that was drafted, and that board member Vaughn takes that back to the board for consideration. Roll call vote, Ms. Chris Fonte,
No.
Mr. Burns,
Same.
sorry, my apologies. Mr. Bell,
No.
Mr. Paz,
My vote is yes.
Dr. Blakely,
Yes.
Mr. Quisenberry,
I believe you just,
Ms. House,
No.
Mr. Kimball,
Yes.
Dr. Dianui,
Yes.
Mr. Bendick,
Yes.
and Ms. Burrell.
Yes.
Your motion carries 6-3, 2 abstaining. 3 noes.
Can I also comment something, Mr. Chairman? Thank you, on what Mr. Bendick said.
That's not right.
Is it kind of related to your motion or is it separate?
It is related to the issue that the board member raised about the board attorney, about the board member coming to EDAC.
Well, hold on one second, before you do that, let's go to Mr. Bendick. I think Mr. Bendick had a motion. Mr. Bendick, do you have a motion?
Right. Seeing as though they have already considered my, what the motion was about, I withdraw it.
Okay, are there any other motions before we go to Dr. Dinwiddie? Are there any other motions? Okay, hearing no other motions, Dr. Dinwiddie.
Yes, I just want again to say, Mr. Bedek, I like communication, but at this time, I don't see anything productive with the board member coming to us. In fact, the board member has expressed that she's working on herself. She's working on herself. She knows she made the mistakes. And when she has worked on herself and gotten the necessary help, maybe in a year's time, maybe later when she has worked on herself. In fact, ideally, she should work on herself when she has resigned. She has said that she is not going to resign because of the other motion. And now that you have the school board attorney here, I wanted to ask, if we have recommended somebody to resign and refuses to resign, is there anything else we can do?
No.
While she is working on herself?
No.
The board, I need to hear that.
So again, this person is a public official elected by constituents. Only two things that can happen. The governor removes the individual, or the electorates remove the individual at the next election.
So you're saying there's nothing we can do if she doesn't resign?
That's correct.
Can we move a vote of no confidence or recommend to the board?
Okay, so what would be the basis of the vote of no confidence?
Discrimination against a group of students.
Okay, so let's be careful here too.
Not just what you said, Ms. Bruno. There's a lot more action that has been expressed here and there. And we have been listening to the board meetings.
Okay, so a couple of things I wanna caution you on. Everybody is entitled to due process. In other words, if you have to be very careful that you are not being the judge, jury, etc., and not allowing the persons to have due process. So if you're going to make an allegation, and I'm not saying true or not true, I'm just using the word because that's what words the attorneys use until the judge or the jury convicts. An allegation of discrimination, you know, you're gonna have to have some evidence. Can't censure somebody based on an allegation. Now, if there's something that you have concrete evidence of, then that is something that's completely different.
That is what the investigation serves, to get whether there is concrete evidence or not. That will not be my responsibility.
So if the governor accepts to investigate, then the governor will do probably through the office of OIG, Department of Education, OIG's office, or the governor's office, or perhaps the attorney general's office, depending on where it goes, and they will conduct an investigation. That is part of their responsibility in their job. And if there's something that becomes fruitful from that investigation, then it will go through the appropriate process. When you wanna make sure at all times that due process is afforded, and that is part of due process. You don't go to the conviction without going through the investigation and gathering the evidence first. Person has a right
I
to.
totally agree with you, Ms. Bruno, and thank you for your guidance. But again, we have a motion moving on to the governor, to hopefully it goes to the governor. We will move on step by step. I agree.
Okay, so if the board decides to move forward with it, then it will go to the governor and then it'll go from there.
That's right.
And I just want to reiterate, I will bring this motion to the board. I will bring it word for word exactly. I will introduce it in a succinct way. But this, I'm totally out of line here, but I'm going to say it because we have staff here. We're gonna be pushing 3 hours here. I realize it's not up to me to say, I'm just the liaison, but I get it. I'm not trying to be flippant. I get it. I understand. I'm gonna bring it forward. That's the best that I can do. And again, it's the EDAC recommendation that I am honoring and I agree with, but the board is 7 members. And so if I don't get traction with it, it's gonna die, all right? So as individual members, Dr. Denui, as individuals, you have a right, as constituents, individuals, you have a right to come to the board and to speak. You have a right as an individual, if you have more information that you want to move forward, you have that right to file a complaint or, whatever you want to do. But honestly, I think we've reached the point of this is about as far as we're gonna be able to go. And I apologize for being beyond where I'm supposed to be as a non-voting member, but I honestly feel like it's pushing 3 hours and staff has been here and that this needs to be wound down, honestly.
Yeah, so we're gonna move forward. The motion's passed to move forward with the recommendation from this board. We'll move forward now to our staff liaison updates.
Mr. Chairman, I don't have an update. Thank you all so much for your attendance. Thank you for the district staff. Relative to redistricting, we'll make sure those things are recorded. And a friendly reminder for the chair and the committee, there is no meeting for the month of December. So we will see you all in January. Happy holidays to you and your families, and we'll see you in 2022.
Happy holidays. Happy holidays, everybody. We got a new bigger board.
To do so, anything good of the order?
One time. I'm gonna call myself a social cultural psychologist and about seeing things modified. I noticed that we describe 3 groups ethnically and still describing European and Africans as black and white. Time to put that in the trash. All humans are shades of brown. So if you're going to describe South Pacific Islanders, Hispanics, Asians, then the others should be described as European and African, not black and white.
Thank you for that. Anything else good of the order?
Alright.
For the good of the order, I'd like to say that I have a lot of respect for the school board liaison, the school board attorney and the school veteran for working with the district board at a very difficult time. And we are not giving up, Ms. Vaughn, we'll keep on going because it's our responsibility to do so. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Anything else good of the order? Anyone in person good of the order?
No.
No, sir. No one has anything.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion is seconded, no discussion or objections, and passed forward with unanimous consent. Happy holidays and safe travels to those traveling. We'll see you at the top of the year.
I would like to call you.
Yeah.